Story 1. No self-awareness. People who stand in the middle of doorways or walkways without consideration for others trying to get around them. Move. Story 2. Someone who cannot simply say, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake. That was my fault. I will fix it." Instead, they blame others or offer excuses. Story 3. They make fools of themselves in public for internet points. YouTube is like Pleasure Island from Pinocchio. Story 4. They will bring extra uninvited guests to events they are invited to without asking the host in advance if it is acceptable. Story 5. Not respecting the personal boundaries of others, such as YouTubers filming people in public without their consent. Story 6. Being rude to someone who is paid to assist you, such as wait staff or cashiers in the service industry, is unacceptable. Story 7. Littering is one of the simplest social norms humanity has created. It requires no effort at that moment. When people litter, they contribute to the degradation of our shared environment. The most concerning example is a dirty diaper. Story 8. Disrespecting libraries involves not returning books, making unnecessary noise in study and reading areas, and improperly reshelving books, either intentionally or out of neglect. Story 9. Not throwing away their rubbish at McDonald's and leaving it on the table for staff to remove makes my blood boil. People who drop food on the floor and make no attempt to pick it up or offer to clean it are even worse, especially when parents allow their child to throw an entire meal on the floor while they just sit there as if it's not their problem. Story 10. When people repost the same question less than a day after it has already been posted. Story 11. When people try on clothes at a store and leave them in a heap, they unfold every shirt and pair of pants, then crumple them back on top of the pile or leave them draped over the rack. It's courteous to clean up after yourself. Story 12. They will tell you that you are going to hell immediately upon discovering that you see the world differently than they do. Story 13. When you ask them to stop doing something, suddenly this becomes the one thing they do to you all the time, always with a smirk on their face. Story 14. It's not even empathy, is it, as much as it is common courtesy, mannerisms, and respect. I feel like it has a lot to do with the amount of attention people want and think they need. Traumatic upbringing, a smooth, happy childhood, or somewhere in between, how they turn out often relates to how much attention they need. The more of a jerk they are, the more attention they want, almost to a self-centered degree. They will deliberately show poor manners and be disrespectful to get that attention because it is all about them. It's a go-around, or if you don't like seeing it, then pick my trash up yourself kind of mentality. People who had difficult upbringings and always tried to stay out of sight of an abusive parent, for example, seem to not want as much attention, so they stay under the radar by doing what is expected, being respectful, and not leaving a mess. Am I wrong? Story 15. Reposting a question from a few hours ago. Story 16. I don't believe this because I've met some decent people with awful adult children and awful parents with decent adult children. It's often not how someone was raised, but simply their character. It's common to see one decent adult in a family while their sibling is not. Story 17. If they are wholly uncurious about the world around them, they will accept everything that is told to them as the way it is and will lack critical thinking skills or well-formed opinions. Unfortunately, many of these individuals believe they are the lone wolf among sheep. Story 18. They have no self-esteem or foundation. They please others and self-deprecate because nobody ever reinforced an inherent self-respect within them. They project their inability to emotionally regulate onto you, not realizing this is what they are doing. Story 19. People who throw rubbish out of their car window concern me. I had a friend who was judgmental of others regarding their carbon footprint, how much meat they ate and where they bought their clothes and groceries. Then, one afternoon, while driving along the A1, she unwrapped a pack of cigarettes and, without a second thought, opened the window and tossed the clear plastic wrap out. I was shocked and lost all respect for her immediately. What a hypocrite. Story 20. Acting entitled in any way, such as cutting in line, treating service workers disrespectfully, or taking a parking spot that you have been waiting for with your turn signal on, demonstrates that someone modeled that behavior early in life. Story 21. They are usually selfless and benevolent, taking care of others. This characteristic is amazing to me. Story 22. You can't put the cart away. In my eyes, that reflects poorly on you. You don't say thank you to someone who holds the door for you. Story 23. Being rude to service people is unacceptable. If I had ever been disrespectful to a cashier or waitress by not saying please and thank you, my mom would have been very upset. Story 24 says, I have no filter proudly, but they are actually insulting others and lacking in manners. Story 25. How they treat waitstaff, the homeless, property, public spaces, teachers, nurses, and grocery store workers reflects a lack of common human decency. Story 26. Bad manners. Don't express appreciation with a thank you. Don't show respect for others with a please. Some individuals don't know enough to remove their hat in a restaurant. Story 27. I have a beautiful example from today. We were at an indoor playground when a girl accidentally hurt my friend's son. My friend firmly instructed the girl to be careful. The girl immediately started crying and ran to her mother, who confronted my friend. My friend explained what happened, but the mother refused to accept it and continued to blame her. I intervened and told her that her child was her responsibility. She walked away yelling at me in front of my daughter. It's challenging to engage in a rational discussion with someone who quickly resorts to scolding when they realize they are in the wrong. Their parent failed to teach them proper manners. Story 28. Someone mentioned a lack of empathy. It is somewhat different but related when a person acts as if they are the only one in the world with problems and becomes irritable around everyone else. Story 29. Not washing hands after using the restroom. Chewing with an open mouth. Failing to stand up for women or children without a place to sit. Story 30. Someone who lacks basic empathy and respect for others, regardless of their background or social standing, may struggle with good manners and understanding personal boundaries. Treating others with kindness is a key indicator of how someone was raised. It is not about using fancy words, but about how individuals make others feel, whether they lift you up or make you feel small. Story 31. Eating with your mouth wide open and not waiting for the rest of the meals to be placed on the table before starting to eat. Story 32. Define awful. They all go through the same stages, and a couple of the stages are challenging. Depending on their environment, some extend certain stages, while others may experience intense reactions during a phase. One thing I discovered after having my child, which was disappointing, is that children are born with personalities. They already are who they are. Sure, home life and experiences influence them slightly, but they are not blank slates, as I initially thought. We are nothing more than financial supporters and safety teams. Story 33. I know it is said all the time, but it is important to consider how people are treated in the service industry. If I ever saw my children acting entitled in that way, I would know I had failed. Story 34. Commanding people to drop everything and do what others want them to do is common in my country. Story 35. Treatment of servers, counter-help, and others in public service roles. Not returning the cart and other basic courtesies. Story 36. Anyone who uses their ability to be cruel is being mean to those who cannot respond. A human hurting an animal, an adult hurting a child, a boss taking advantage of an employee. Story 37. When their response to any situation where they could help someone close to them is something like, I'm not obligated to help them, it can be frustrating. Yes, you are technically correct that you are not obligated to assist, but if it's someone you care about and the task is easy or quick without any real detriment to yourself, I can't help but think less of you as a person. It suggests you were not raised well. Story 38. Being especially cruel to their own children in general, the elderly, animals, and service workers is concerning. I understand that children may not be everyone's preference, but there is a specific way to treat them. It's not fair to belittle them for not being as mentally developed. Talking down to them is unacceptable, and I have witnessed much worse behavior. I'm not referring to the common sentiment of disliking children. My concern goes beyond that. Story 39. Spitting or snotting on the ground, preferably when you are walking right behind someone to experience this unpleasantness up close. Story 40. Being rude to staff or any working-class individuals is my biggest pet peeve. Constant bullying and teasing among friends followed by the excuse, "It's a joke," reflects a bunch of insecure people. Also, there are women who change their demeanor immediately around men, and that is very noticeable. Story 41. All of the following regarding public transport: putting feet on seats, watching videos on a phone without headphones or having a phone conversation on speaker mode, eating anything with a strong odor, such as an apple or a chocolate bar, littering, of course. Story 42. If a person cannot speak without using profanity frequently, I have my doubts about both their upbringing and their lack of intelligence. Story 43. Expecting others to clean up after them when they are fully capable of doing so is unacceptable. Regardless of how someone was raised, there comes a point in life when you observe what other adults do and understand the importance of taking responsibility. You should clean up after yourself instead of leaving it for others. Why should anyone else have to clean up after you, including wiping the toilet rim, removing streaks from the toilet bowl, rinsing out the shower, putting dishes in the dishwasher, and cleaning the stove, counters, and floor after cooking? It is childish behavior, and as an adult, you should take note of how others maintain their spaces and extend the same courtesy to them. Story 44. Respect for others. I have extended family members whose children hit, kick, and punch adults for fun. They swear constantly and do not take responsibility for their actions. The adults do not stop them. Please control your children. I do not enjoy being around them. Story 45. When they don't treat the working class with proper respect, not saying please or thank you, making a scene about an insignificant thing, being entitled and thinking they are better. Just being an overall narcissistic person irritates me and makes me think they didn't have a great upbringing. Story 46. They make significant life announcements at someone else's event, such as announcing a pregnancy or getting engaged at another person's wedding. Story 47. Entitlement and an inability to accept being wrong or making a mistake. Always blaming others for everything. Story 48. They do not ask whether they should take their shoes off when they come inside for the first time and just leave their shoes on. People with shoes on can be unpleasant. Story 49. Not returning the shopping cart reflects a basic attitude in society. People who do not return shopping carts demonstrate a lack of consideration for others. Story 50. Not returning the shopping cart to the cart corral and simply leaving it next to the parking spot is inappropriate, because it is the responsibility of the courtesy clerks to collect the carts. Story 51. They believe in a single-party political system, and their party represents everything that is good and right, while the opposing party embodies pure evil and hatred. Story 52. When a white person uses the racial slur in a hospital setting, I was willing to get fired for it. I was stunned. Story 53. People often do not treat much older individuals with respect. In my country, we refer to everyone older as aunt or uncle unless they request otherwise. Even then, we use terms like ma'am or sir. Some individuals disregard the impact they have on others' personal space. They overlook others' time without apologizing or notifying them if something comes up. Not respecting someone else's belongings, regardless of their monetary value, is also common. Many lack basic courtesy, such as saying please and thank you, and do not greet someone before initiating a conversation. Story 54. When I was a waiter, I served a table for 2 nannies and 3 children. As I brought out their food, one of the children shouted, "Mine," and their nannies acted as if it was normal. Story 55. They lack empathy to the degree that their ability to think of others is hindered, and they can only think of themselves. They lack basic skills, including one that should be the most fundamental of all: critical thinking, previously known as common sense. They are not just uninformed, but willfully ignorant and close-minded. These are the 3 main traits that I observe far too often. The United States has at least 77 million people exhibiting these characteristics. Story 56. There are a group of people I unfortunately encountered in my life. Thankfully, I finally realized that I do not need them in my life. The stark difference in their selfish behaviors and the way they pretended to care for others was disturbing. The ridiculous facade of how they falsely portrayed themselves compared to their true nature was truly vile. My hands, heart, and spirit have been cleansed of such negativity since I opened my eyes. The hatred disappeared because I let it go. Story 57. I knew a girl whose communication was often focused on what she wanted. 50% of her responses were phrases like, "I want this," or "I don't want that." When anyone made a request, such as, "Do you mind if we go to this restaurant?" or "That restaurant looks good," she hardly considered their opinions. Instead, she would still respond with "I want" or "I don't want," or she would get upset because she didn't understand subtle suggestions. If she didn't get her way, she would argue about it constantly, cry, or simply do what she wanted without regard for how it affected others. She was 22. Story 58. When they step out looking better and more put together than their toddler. When they let their toddlers or children walk around barefoot in public. When they are in their 30s and still believe things like a man in Africa getting two of every animal, some of which aren't even from Africa, getting on a boat, and being the only survivors in the world during a flood. What happened to the other boats in the world? And 2 hippos, 2 African elephants, and 2 tigers, and then you believe he got all of them on the boat too? Also, being adults and believing a woman turned to salt for looking back at a city that was too immoral. Story 59. I was on a Glasgow bus a few years ago, minding my business. A group of young men opened a window and started screaming at an elderly lollipop woman, the crossing's attendant, that she was an offensive old cow. Calling a woman a cow here is a serious insult. I confronted them fiercely. Little troublemakers. Story 60. When they are ready to end their lives because someone breaks up with them, they feel like they are less than if they are not in a relationship at all times. Story 61. When someone makes a small mistake and I accept it and try to move on, but they keep explaining why it happened, it indicates that they may have had unkind parents. I find this challenging myself. Story 62. They have politically motivated hats, shirts, or flags. You just know the conversation is going to be one-sided and domineering. Story 63. Stealing and refusing to acknowledge that as a bad thing. Their excuse is that if I don't do it, other people will. Story 64. Swears every other word and has no manners. Uses language from the internet in everyday speech. Someone once said, "Laughing my ass off" to me, and I just stood there because he didn't laugh at all but only said the acronym. Story 65. Blue hair, breasts, and male genitalia, leftist ideals, and the belief that California is great. Before you comment, I want everyone to understand that I do not care at all. The leftist mindset is harmful to the entire world. Story 66. When people say whenever, like when I was young or when I was riding my bike, it's just when. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.